Welcome to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Suzy Buttress. As a casual birder, I take pleasure in watching the wild birds around me, wherever I am. In my show, I share the joy of birding. I tell you about the birds I've seen, speak with experts and enthusiasts, go on bird outings, and I share stories from birders around the world. Mike Dilger is an ecologist, writer, and well-known wildlife presenter, appearing on popular shows such as BBC's The One Show and Springwatch. Since childhood, he's been passionate about plants, insects, and of course, birds. He never lost that passion and thirst for knowledge, and his career has led him to spending long periods in South and Central America, East Africa, and Southeast Asia, as well as all over Great Britain, learning all about their wildlife and ecosystems. As a wildlife communicator, he shares his vast knowledge and enthusiasm for the natural world, making films, writing books and articles, and giving talks about his encounters when travelling around the world. He's also a fabulous tour leader, and I speak from experience. Mike was our tour guide a couple of years ago when we took a birding break in Scotland. It was an absolute delight sitting down with Mike at last year's Global Bird Fair to hear about what truly lights him up about the natural world. Mike, thank you so much for joining me on the Casual Birder podcast.
Last time we did this, Suzy, we were in the middle of the Moray Firth, standing in about an inch of mud with birds flying all around us. Didn't we have a flipping brilliant time?
That was a perfect morning. I loved it so much. And it's all due to how you took the group out to that. We would never have gone to a location like that. It was quite overwhelming because there were lots and lots of waders, but you took the time to help us understand what we were seeing. But that calm morning with just the calls of the birds around us was just absolutely perfect.
It's wonderful because most people look at a muddy estuary and think, I can never go on that. But it's well known that the birders at Findhorn Bay in Moray Firth can walk out there, walk about 3/4 of the way out. They will not be disturbing the birds at all. And then you can have this amazing kind of visual and auditory experience, Suzy. We had pink-footed geese flying all around us. There was a massive flock of golden plover, I think you recall.
There were. They took off and the sunlight caught them and we really saw the golden plumage.
Sometimes birds have the crappiest of names. Black-headed gull. I mean, it's not black, it's a brown, and it's not a head, it's a hood. But golden plover is really right. In the right light, Suzy, golden plover are magical birds. But then we had pintail as well, and we had widgeon and teal and shoveler, and we had waders from all over the northern hemisphere. I think there were bar-tailed godwits, black-tailed godwits, curlew, redshank, oystercatcher, ring plover, sanderling. Oh, it's just too many to remember. Dunlin.
One of the things that I really appreciated about that tour, which was around Scotland a couple of years ago in November, which I thought we'll not see anything. We saw so many birds, and you worked really, really hard to make that trip a success for us.
Well, the guests made it brilliant. You and your husband John were terrific guests for the record.
But what I really appreciated about it was I've never really used a scope before. Now, I have my own one, but I just never got on with it. But you showed us the best way to use the scope, and actually we used it, or you used your one and helped us all see all those birds that were off in the distance that, you know, when you look at an estuary and you see birds in the distance, it's almost like, all right, I know they're birds, I might be able to spot one or two that I recognise, but the rest is just birds. And by using the scope and looking at an individual bird and looking at that and understanding its behaviour, looking at its plumage marks, that really opened my eyes to the use of a scope.
It's a very habitat-specific piece of equipment. I mean, if I go into a woodland, the birds are dashing around all over the place. The last bit of kit I'll take in, Suzy, is a scope. You just don't need it there. And there are other habitats as well and they're not terribly useful. But if you're doing anything on an estuary where the birds can be a long way away, you can't get any cover to hide behind, then a scope is essential. And also if you're doing sea watching, looking for skuas passing, shearwaters, maybe if you're looking at storm petrel or leech's petrel or sabine's gull or anything like that, then a scope is really essential. And I find as well, with a lot of beginner bird watchers when they come on the trips that I do up to Speyside, they don't really appreciate how far the birds can be away. I mean, Scotland, the Highlands of Scotland, in the period you were there, is brilliant for divers. We had great northern diver, black-throated diver, and red-throated diver in winter plumage. And actually, in summer plumage, all three are really quite easy, because one's got a red throat, one's got a black throat, and one's very different with an absolutely massive bill, the great northern diver with a funny little kind of pearl necklace around its neck. But in winter, they're not a million miles apart. So you do need that scope to really get up close and personal. So when the diver's out there, if it's got that snooty upward bill, it's going to be the red throat. If it's got a bill that's nice and horizontal with the black below the eye and the white wheelhouse by its feet, that's going to be the black throat. And a bill like a massive stiletto dagger, it's going to be the great northern. But I can just about do it with binoculars, but a scope makes it a lot easier. And for getting people on who've not seen them before, it's kind of essential.
And those ways you described the birds just then, that helped us so much, both on the week following when we went to Isla on our own.
Oh yeah, you had an eagle fest.
We did. We had a wonderful white-tailed eagle flying over us at the port as we were leaving. But also, we went to Shetland last summer and we saw a red-throated diver and remembered, because we were trying to work out, what is that? Because it was a bit way off, but it had the snooty beak and your voice was back in our heads. And so it's really great that you have those little ways of describing them that stick, especially for novice people.
I don't think you're a novice. You're underselling yourself, Suzy.
Some birds. But I will just point out that I had, not only with the scope, we had some close-up views, and I particularly had close-up views of coal tits at...
Lochgarten.
That's it, yeah. And also I saw a crested tit, which everyone else missed.
Do you know what? I remember that week so clearly because most times I can get a crested tit easily for the group. It's best when it's cold, and it's hard during the breeding season because the birds are in the tops of the trees, they're busy feeding their youngsters. Or when it's mild, there's still plenty of food up in the trees for them. They've got a very distinctive dry trill, which I can't really do. And usually they're one of those birds that if you learn the call, you can spot them. So I took all the guests over to one area where I thought we'd see them. And you said, Mike, I'm just going to hold back here. And you were the only one who saw them. I've got a slight issue with that, Suzy. I meant to find the birds, and you were meant to go, oh, thanks for showing me that bird. And Suzy came back, and she said, I've got a picture as well. You showed me your picture, and it was a crested tit, and it was a lovely shot as well, so well done.
Yes, I was very proud of that. And the reason that I'd stayed behind was because I was hand-feeding the coal tits. And,
amazing.
And just, I had a double whammy then. I had the hand-feeding coal tits and the crested tit.
Well, that's the beauty of one of these trips we do in the autumn or winter to Speyside. We go there to the Abernethy Caledonian pine forest, which Lochgarten is part of, and show people the crested tits. And actually, the coal tits steal the show. Coal tits in most people's gardens, crested tits only found in the Scottish Caledonian forests. And we show them the crested tit, and then we take some seed, and the coal tits come down. It's the only place I know in Britain where they come down and they feed on your hand, and it's just a beautiful experience. And I've got this picture I showed yesterday on one of my talks. I take my hat off, and I'm follically challenged, Suzy. There's no grass growing on a busy street. I put some seed on top of my head, and a coal tit landed on top of the head. And it's a brilliant picture. It's like tit, head. I'll let your listeners put the two and two together and come up with a suitable description. But, the close interaction with the tits is just a joy to behold.
Absolutely. Because they're coming and sitting, sometimes they only stay a short time, but you see them so close, and it's just an absolutely amazing experience.
They land on your hand and they just delicately grab a finger, and they're light as a feather. And it's the most delicate mugging in the world, isn't it?
It is. So thank you so much for that. One of the other things, and I mentioned this yesterday when I was talking to Alan Davis and Ruth Miller, was how much work you put in. I know that we shouldn't see that bit. It should all go smoothly, but you did. You absolutely put so much work into making that trip a success. And it really opened my eyes to how hard it can be to do a guiding tour like that, because I guess at the base of it, you want to share the joy of birds. You want to help people open their eyes and see what's around us and enable them to be able to go away and do that for themselves. But then you're coming up with a whole group of people with all different objectives, different personalities. We've all got to get on together in that. And also, you have to deal with weather, you have to make last-minute changes to schedule, but still hope that we'll see everything. And I was really, really impressed with how hard you worked, but how you made it a success.
Thank you. They are long hours, but I'm not painting the Forth Bridge or cleaning toilets for a living. I'm looking at wildlife. Often they're 14, 15-hour days, so I'm up early. And I find the most difficult thing is coping with the weather and coping with tide is known because tide's really important. For example, when you go to the Moray Firth, you've got to find the right time to go onto the estuary, or we're going to get wet feet pretty quickly, Suzy. But actually, the weather can be quite tricky. So I'm constantly kind of changing and amending locations we might go to. I describe it as a constant low level of pressure to find stuff. And when I've got guests like you, it's brilliant because you're going like, look at this, Mike, look at that, Mike. And because, I'm only one pair of eyes, so if I always shout out, no matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's a robin, doesn't matter if it's a redneck phalarope, just shout out what it is. And we can get as many pairs of eyes on it as possible and we can enjoy it. But to be honest, two things I really like. I like looking at wildlife. I've done it all my life. And I like people. And it's amazing how you talk about an eclectic bunch of people coming together. People from all backgrounds. Doctors, lawyers, captains of industries, teachers, unemployed people. But what they do is that we all come together with a family for that week. And I've done a lot of tours. And I really can't think of a single one where everyone's fallen out. And we all kind of pull each other up. We all go, oh, well done finding that bird. Everyone's really excited for someone who sees a new bird. Like, in Shetland recently, someone was so excited to see a wimble, and everyone was genuinely thrilled for them. And for that week, or those few days, we are the most beautiful and oddest family you can possibly imagine. And the only bit I find genuinely difficult, and I really mean this, is actually saying goodbye. I bloody hate it. Because you might, and I've bumped into you several times since, Suzy, it's great. And I haven't seen John yet, and I know he's around here somewhere. But it's really genuinely hard saying goodbye because you spent a lot of time with that people, and they're genuinely people I meet that I really, really like. There's some people I meet who don't stick in the memory, I'm afraid to say, and the other one or two people, and I genuinely mean one or two people I might think, oh, I hope you don't book any more tours. But they are really, really few and far between. I can almost remember them because it's less than the fingers on one hand. It's like the little finger and maybe the next one to it. And I've done quite a few tours. So I love the fact we're all thrown together because we all have a commonality. We all love nature. And some love nature and photography. Some love nature and talking about it, like me and you, like gassing on about it for a living. But we all have something in common. And so meet like-minded people in a great place. It's a beautiful moment in time.
Now, the other thing that you did, which, I could take or leave, because
I think I might know where you're going here.
Because I'm all about birds, is you talk about plants as well. Well, you talk about beetles, you talk about all sorts of things. But we took a walk through the Abernethy Forest. And that was actually quite eye-opening to me. I was like, great, we'll go, I'll try and see some of the birds here. And you kept pointing out things like some mosses and some lichens and some small berry plants, which I would have totally overlooked, but you had a story about each one. And because we were on the walk, I was forced to listen. Not forced to listen, you know what I mean? It was offered to me that I wouldn't have sought that out.
Yeah.
And that actually made a much more well-rounded walk for me because it had all those extra things. Now, I know that you've just created this book, 1,000 Shades of Green. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's about trying to see 1,000 different wild plants in one calendar year. And it's lovely what you say about kind of enjoying the plants. I often describe on guided weeks as them being supporting artists. Maybe the osprey is the kind of the Brad Pitt, or whatever, the redneck phalarope is the Angelina Jolie of the kind of the birding world. So we're talking, I know that plants are a bit of a supporting artist, but there are some amazing ones like twin flower and coleroot orchid, and some of the other orchids which are real mega stars. So what I've tried to kind of in some ways do is try and persuade birders to occasionally, when there's no birds to look at, to occasionally look down. And I actually think a basic knowledge of plants makes you a better birder. So I know phenomenal birders who will go, oh, I can hear a Dartford warbler. Oh, there it is. And they know a call of a Dartford warbler, the song of a Dartford warbler, but they don't know what it's perched on. It's like, it's perched on gorse. Gorse is like one of the commonest plants on heathland in Britain, and they don't even know the name of the plant. But I think once you kind of get to understand habitats, understand the key plants that are there, then you actually become a better birder as well. And the whole idea of the book was born out of lockdown because we were all forced indoors, back in our barricades, and we were allowed to go walking. And I was with my boy. He wasn't that keen on birds. He's getting keener now because when you're young, it's really hard to use binoculars, Suzy, and the birds are really quick and flying around all over the place. And he kept pointing out the plants. And I knew a reasonable amount about plants, but he going, what's that, Daddy? And I go, it's a violet, but I'm not sure which species of violet. What's that, Daddy? It's a forget-me-not, but I don't know which one. And I took my plant book out, and it took the handbrake off. And it was amazing, and I love learning. Everyone loves learning. And I love seeing new things as well. So I was seeing new plants virtually every day. I never see new birds. I've had like 2 bird ticks in Britain in the last 5 years. I never see new birds. So seeing new things was really exciting. And then out of lockdown, this idea was born where I used 2021 to try and see 1,000 different wild plants. A lot with my family, a lot locally to try and make it carbon conscious, and then dovetailing on trips elsewhere, trying to see other plants. And it was the most amazing journey. And the beauty and tragedy of it was, Suzy, that I often had the botanical reserve to myself. There was nobody else there. So it was wonderful, but also tragic that no one else is looking at the plants. You go to Minsmere, Titchwell, Hamwall, the Murray Firth, the Caledonian Pine Forest. We're bumping into birders all the time, but not enough people are looking at plants, and they are the bed and breakfast to the nation's birds. So I don't want to convert you to become the casual plant spotter birdcast, but just appreciation of the plants around you is a really good thing, and it will make you a better birder.
No, I do remember you pointing out some of the plants and saying about how particular birds will feed on those and how it feeds into the plant's life cycle as well. And that other plants were attracting certain types of insects that will attract certain types of birds. So it's all interconnected. And up till then, I had been very much, I would just look at the birds, and it just opened my eyes to what else was out there. It can be a bit overwhelming because, you had 1,000 species you were looking for, and, how many bird species do we have in the UK that we're likely to see. So you did actually get to 1,000 species?
I did get to 1,000, and I picked the number randomly. There's about 3,500 species of plant in the UK, and that includes kind of flowers, shrubs, trees, ferns, sedges and rushes. So I did the whole lot. But 3,500, but to see 1,000, it was a brilliant number. It's a brilliant number because it's 1,000, and 1,000 is a very memorable number. But also as well, it really, really tested me. I got to identify sedges, which are really quite tricky, but beautiful. And they give you such an insight into the habitat. Plants are amazing because they're rooted to the spot. They have to like or lump where they live. And so you see one plant like a common rock rose, and it tells me the geology is limestone. This has never been ploughed, never been fertilised. That's the food plant for things like the common blue butterfly, I think, and a number of other species as well. So, it just tells you so much about the environment. If you're a nature detective, plants are brilliant because they reveal so much about the place that you're in, where you're walking around. So, I do still look at birds professionally, Suzy, when I'm hanging out with people like you, but half the time I'm looking down. Sorry.
No, that's brilliant because you're sharing that knowledge. So that book is now out and available. I'll put the link in the episode notes.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the end of our time together here. We've had quite a schedule, and it's been quite challenging at times with the weather here, but today is holding up so far. What I would like to ask you is about if you had a fantasy birding day, where you could be anywhere in the world. It could be any time period, just in case you want to look at extinct birds, and any bird species. How would you spend that day?
Oh, tough question. Be really intrigued to see how everybody else has answered it in your podcast. I'm going to be slightly indulgent and have 2. My own back garden. I love it. I love the comings and goings. My favourite bird is a bullfinch. Okay, Suzy just proffered her sweater towards me.
My logo.
Where the logo. And I'd completely forgotten that. And I'll tell you why I'm not making it up in a second. My son's favourite bird is a robin, and my wife's favourite bird is a jay. They've all got kind of pink or red in them. And we both have those birds written in our wedding rings, actually, interestingly enough. Well, actually, my wife does. I have something else written in there, their initials. My favourite location will be there. But if not there, then I'd like to spend a day in the cloud forest of South America, in Ecuador, on the western slopes, between about 1,200 and 1,400 metres, the world epicenter for hummingbirds, the world epicenter for tanagers, good for toucans, good for Andean cock of the rock, good for the toucan barbet. The cock of the rocks go... I've spent a year and a half working there. I absolutely love the place. I want my ashes scattered there. So I would like half my ashes and half my day to go to be my own back garden, then the other half in the cloud forest of South America.
Sounds perfect.
Es mi vida. That's my life.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. Really enjoyed speaking with you this afternoon. Hope you enjoy the rest of Global Bird Fair, and let's hope the rain stays away. But thanks very much for joining me.
My pleasure, Suzy. Great to catch up with you again and keep using that scope.
Oh, absolutely. If you'd like to find out more about Mike, do visit his website, mikedilger.co.uk, and check out his latest book, 1000 Shades of Green, the account of his year-long attempt to see 1,000 of our nation's plants, exploring a variety of habitats from moors and mountains to city centres. And if you'd like to hear the recording of Mike and me standing on the mud at Findhorn Bay that we referred to in the interview, stay listening after the end credits. Originally heard in episode 106, the one containing my birding review of 2021, I'm sharing that wonderful morning again this episode. My thanks to Oscar Henderson for handling the production of all of the podcasts at last year's Global Bird Fair, and to Charlie Bingham for her work in scheduling all of our guests for interview. I'm really looking forward to this year's event. If you're interested in coming along, take a look at the Global Bird Fair website, globalbirdfair.org. And if you're going, I do hope you'll come over and say hi. I'll be there all 3 days. If you'd like to support the show's production, you can contribute to the show's tip jar by buying a virtual coffee. You'll find the link for that in the episode notes. All of your support, financial or otherwise, is very much appreciated. And I love hearing about your sightings. Tell me about them by leaving me a message or a voicemail using the contact form on my website, casualbirder.com. Maybe you'd like to join the Casual Birder Bird Club. We meet virtually once a month to share our birding stories or to watch presentations from special guests. We have such lovely members joining us from around the world, and it doesn't matter your level of birding experience. If you listen to the podcast, you're welcome to attend the club. I've put the link to the FAQ about the club in the episode notes if you'd like to find out more and sign up. My thanks to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by the Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder podcast. As promised, here's an excerpt from episode 106. It's the moment where Mike Dilger and I were standing on the mud as the tide had gone out in Findhorn Bay, looking around at all the wonderful waders we could see. Hope you enjoy it. So we're standing in the middle of Findhorn Bay.
Mud.
Mud.
Glorious mud, Suzy. We're right in the middle of the estuary. It's the River Findhorn runs right in front of us out to the Murray coast, where the River Findhorn goes right the way back into the mountains, the Cairngorm Mountains, and we're in the middle of an enormous estuary, and there are so many birds around us. It's frankly astonishing, and it's really noisy as well. It's loads of birds to see, but also using your ears, plenty to hear.
Yeah, and it's an absolutely beautiful morning. There's very little wind. It's kind of a blue sky with a little bit of grey cloud, but it's really, really calm. So when we do see birds close up, we're seeing beautiful reflections in the water. But just looking out, it's not too far away. I mean, we're we're not disturbing the birds by being out here, but we can see big banks of birds. You can hear a curlew in the background there. But there's an amazing number of species. Do you want to tell us some of the species we're seeing here?
Well, where do we start? Wildfowl and waders with a few geese thrown in. First and foremost, it's a brilliant place in early winter for pink-footed geese. They'll spend the night here where they feel safe, and then early in the morning they'll go into the barley fields to feed. So we're seeing skeins of them above us. They're going inland. You can hear that wink, 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 and it's a rubbish name, pink-footed geese. I think it's chocolate-headed goose, because half the time when they're standing in mud, they've got brown feet, not pink feet. So we've had lots of pink feet flying over. And wildfowl and waders, I mean, brilliant place for pintail. That beautiful, elegant bird with that long, stately neck, chocolate head again, and that white line up the side. And it's got a bit of a yellow bum, like vanilla ice cream colour, with a black tail and that lovely long tail streamers. So a lot of pintail out there. Waders, bar-tailed godwit, black-tailed godwit, curlew, redshank, golden plover. These are pink feet flying overhead here.
Just one on its own.
Just one on its own. Apparently there were 19,000 here last night. But the waders are wonderful. There's bar-tailed godwit and black-tailed godwit, which are two of my favourite ones. Bar-tailed godwit is a high Arctic breeder coming down here, much more common in North Scotland and North Britain in the winter. And the black-tailed godwits I see down in the Somerset Levels close to where I live. The bar-tail's a bit scaly, likes to hang out on its own. The black-tail's a bit more elegant, longer-legged, needle-long bill, like a sewing machine feeding, looking for all the lugworms and ragworms and little tiny shrimps in the mud. And then in between those there's the dunlin, the little tiny dunlin running around, the archetypal small bird, and a lovely flock of golden plover.
Oh, weren't they absolutely wonderful? They took off briefly and flew around, and what a fantastic sight with the light on them, really looking golden. That's the first time I've really seen them looking so golden, and then flashing white as they turn in the air. Just absolutely beautiful. There's also been, we've got redshank, a small number of redshank, and some oyster catchers, ones that I'm quite familiar with.
And the curlew, plenty of curlew, bubbling away.
So three species there that I confidently can identify on my own. The godwit have been a little bit more difficult, but you gave us some tips just now about the difference between the bar-tailed and the black-tailed godwits in terms of the shape of the bill.
Yeah, the blacktail tends to be a bit longer and slightly upturned, whereas the bar-tailed godwit a bit straighter. The key thing as well is the black-tailed godwit is more sociable, likes to hang out with itself, with the bar-tail a bit more antisocial, feeding away, nice sewing machine action. And because the bar-tailed godwit has got shorter legs, so between the knee and its rump or its vent, that femur is much shorter. You can often pick them out from a distance, even if you're unsure. Obviously, when they fly, they're easy, because the bar-tail's got a barred tail and barred wings, whereas the black-tailed godwit looks amazing. It's got a massive big white wing stripe, a huge big white band across its tail. So when they fly, they're incredibly easy, but they can be quite tricky when they're on the ground. So sociable black-tailed godwits, antisocial bar-tails, a bit shorter, a bit stocky. And the thing I always look for with bar-tailed godwits is they look really scaly across the back, whereas the black-tails are much more kind of plainer, smoother grey. So they can be quite confusing to people who don't see them very often.
Now, we are out here in the middle of the estuary, and we're relatively close to the birds. I mean, they're still by sight, they're little dots, and you can sort of see some of them that you recognise by the shape or the colour, but the vast majority of them, to my eyesight at the moment, small dots. So majority of us here are using binoculars, but you've also got a scope, and that makes a massive difference, doesn't it, for the waders?
I think particularly for birds on the sea, on the coast, on estuaries, a scope is pretty essential, I have to say. When you're in woodland, it's about as much use as a chocolate teapot half the time, because the birds are moving so quickly you can't get on them unless they perch. But the great thing is we're taking a group of guests out today, and the lovely thing about a scope is you can set it up, you can lock it off, and you can point out one individual bird. And my scope's sort of 30 to 60 times. My binoculars are only 10 times.
Right.
So the birds that are right on the edge of binoculars, you can definitively identify with the scope. So they are incredibly useful. And usually, Suzy, when you're watching on estuaries, on the coast, the birds can be really, really long way away. So it just helps you clinch that ID, plus helps less experienced bird watchers get on it. Or if you can't find the bird we're looking for in amongst that flock, you can hone in on it and tee it up.
Yeah, that is really key, because even now, I still find it quite overwhelming when there's a large number of birds all seeming to look the same, trying to find those individuals. Like you spotted some shovelers out there. And I think I could quite easily have lost those in amongst all of the brown bodies out there, even with the very distinctive bill, because it's the pure numbers of birds.
But the lovely thing is we're out here, we're at low tide, we won't be here in high tide, otherwise me and you will be up to our nether regions in water. We've got all the time in the world just to sit there, take your time, just slowly work through the flock. We're not in any rush to find the birds, so it's just beautiful. As you say, it's a glorious day. The light's quite low, so actually for the photographers in our group, they're having a fab time as well, because they've got that almost that golden hours being extended. So the light's nice, lovely weather, there's no wind, and so we're actually enjoying the sounds. You can hear the curlews, the redshank, there's the brr, brr of the dunlin as well that are calling away. It's a sight and sound magnificence.
Yes, no,
that's quite a slightly strange choice of words there, but you know what I mean.
No, it's an absolutely beautiful day, and I look forward to doing some more identifying of new species for today as well. So thanks very much, Mike. Thanks for your time, and looking forward to the rest of the day.